Hello, hello, hello.
Hey,
And
hey
now,
everybody. Hey Theo. Oh, hey guys. It's like the Brady Bunch, except not. Here's a story of a guy named Nico who was raising three. Not really. No. So that's not going to
No,
work.
no, those three are my own. I am
Well,
the
okay,
children of my own.
okay.
Yeah.
Listen, thank everybody. Welcome to another exciting edition of The Mainstream, a podcast specializing in exploring how all of this crazy blockchain Web3 stuff is going to be impactful in the mainstream, and how it's going to be adopted. What is the big use case? What is the killer dApp? What is the killer application or applications in parentheses? And again, I don't want to say that this podcast was born out of frustration, but it kind of was. Since myself, I've been in the blockchain business for 8 years now, and in blockchain years, that's about 800 years. I just think that we as an industry need to kind of grab ourselves by our bootstraps and start making stuff happen. We got the technology, we got it. We got it. It's been there is enough progress where we should just start going out there and making it happen in the mainstream, in the in the big industry, right? Mass adoption is what we're talking about. And so for that purpose, I actually, as every week we have a guest with us that is from the mainstream, from the mass adoption
field.
world, right? And so, this week is no different. So we got John with us. And so, Theo, why don't you, or Nico, and actually, I probably should introduce Nico. Probably, right? That's a good idea, right? Okay, so Theo, you should all know. And if you don't know who Theo is, you should really re-examine your life, because he is, look, he makes cookies that will change your life. They will.
That's what I do.
Yeah, and Nico, he's I just like how he just defines himself as co-founder, and it's vague enough. It's vague enough to actually be just co-founder of what, of your life, of your purpose, of your passion. Is just co-founder, but in fact, he is the co-founder of zenGate, which I am the CEO whatnot of. And so Nico, it's really nice to have Nico on the podcast this week, because Nico and I have actually been friends for quite a while. Nico is the one that introduced me to the Cardano ecosystem. So all this stuff that you mute me for on Twitter is because of Nico.
Sorry, it's my fault. But to my defense, I didn't even know what Cardano was when I was introducing Dan to it. I had no idea what they were doing.
But in all reality, in all seriousness, Nico was the one that made the introduction from with Charles and Jeremy back in 2016, and he's the reason why I took on this journey into Cardano, and so it's great to have him here. Now to get back into our guest for today, and this is actually, it's really great to have John with us. So you know what? How about I let Nico? Nico. Well, it's okay. It happens. It happens. It's technology. It's live. It's whatever. I'll let Nico down here, or maybe Chef over there. tell us exactly how we came to know John, which is a really, really, it's a nice story. So why don't you guys take it?
Yeah, maybe I should take this. So, last March, zenGate, we attended the World Tea Expo in Las Vegas, Nevada, and we met a number of really sharp minds in the tea industry, and really that's one thing that I've been amazed by, how many really passionate and intelligent people are in tea. And through one of those connections, I became connected to John through LinkedIn. I think we were looking for connections in Canada. Like, I know this guy that you know. And I reached out to John, and I got a lot more than I bargained for. And but in a really good way. And I think he's got some great insights. It was such an amazing matchup because of where he is in his career and the industry and his insights that he can share with us. I mean, like John, I'm not a big blockchain kind of guy. I didn't even know what Cardano was when they were doing it when I introduced Dan to them. I've not really been a big adopter, so I'm kind of more on the mainstream side of things as well. But John being out there, we're finding the way to get that mass adoption through functionality. And John had already come to a number of conclusions before we ever spoke. And so it's going to be great to get his insights and his opinions on what we're doing. So, John, welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Well, I mean, look, most of what you've spoken about has been double Dutch to me because I'm a total Luddite. But I have lived in this real world of tea for 40 years now. Yeah, I know. If you cut my head off, I'll have more rings than the three of you put together. But the fact is that when I entered the tea industry, tea was the Henry Ford industry. You could have any color you wanted as long as it was black tea. But now it's everything. There's a myriad of different botanicals. And everyone, if you go to that World Tea Expo that Nico did and I've been to, everyone talks about tea growing and flourishing. But actually, that's total BS. The fact is that the people that grow it are not being given a living income. And retailers and CPG companies continue to completely rape and pillage. It's honestly, it's despicable. And I'm old enough not to give a shit. So I want something to be done about it. And I think the only way is to embrace your insanity with regards to technology and bring about a revolution in tea.
John, it's a pleasure having you here with us. And I think it was a great intro from Dan, Nico, and yourself. This is going to be a very, very exciting conversation. We do have some really nice topics for us to discuss. What I would like to do is to start by giving a little bit of information around your background. And by all means, please feel free to add whatever you feel that I've missed. So just for our audience and everyone out there that is viewing this, watching this, John has actually spent over 35 years in the tea industry, working with global brand leaders, with trading houses, and also private label packers. The last 27 years, John has actually been in North America, where he has been an active member of the trade, sitting on the board of the U.S. Tea Association, and also as a regular speaker and gold medal award taste panelist at the North American tea conferences. So when we talk about tea, John is definitely the guy to give us some information. Mr. John, can you please take it over and give us a little bit more information? Tell us, how did you get into this industry, from the beginning, and what kept you in there for all these years?
Well, the beginning is pretty simple, really. I was in the Royal Navy for a long time during the Cold War era. Some of those will only read it in history books, but it was an actual thing, not a refrigerator. And I was there sort of navigating ships for a while, got a bit bored, left, and then was looking for something that wasn't a 9-to-5 desk job. And one of the companies, mainly trading companies, that interviewed me was Tetley's tea company in the UK. And they were the only companies that during my interview then took me to the pub. And therefore I went, yeah, this is for me. And more seriously, though, what they did, they had an amazing apprenticeship scheme where they sent you overseas for a year to different producing origins to really learn the trade from the bush to the cup. And it was that experience, seeing the multiple number of people employed right at the top end of the supply chain and all the dependence that were associated with that tea was required to give a livelihood to, that really impassioned me and has really been my guiding light from there on in. From the UK, I moved from CPG companies to a trading company that I started over there in partnership with a coffee company. And that eventually was relocated to Toronto, Canada. I decided to come. I spent 15, 16 years on the trading side. So now I've had the origin side. Now I've got the trading bit. And then I eventually joined one of the largest private label packers in North America, which was very interesting for me because it's completely different from the CPG world, different cost build up, a lot more zero cost accounting, which is relevant to this conversation. And it also, in that role, I was not only procuring and doing product development, but I was also in charge of sustainable programming, both for tea and coffee. So I saw the relevance of sustainability in whatever soft commodity you're working is the same. You know, people are the same. Sure, the product may change, but there is a one solution fits all. And so eventually I decided, you know, I've done enough talking, and you probably think the same. So I decided to put my money where my mouth is and start my own small branded company. That's the LST Inc. that you referred to, and my own consultancy. So I do a bit of work with the FAO, looking at either emerging origins or origins that have fallen on hard times because of the lack of communication actually between the ground and the consumer. And that has just, if you will, case hardened my belief that we need to look for a different way and someone needs to shout about it.
This is actually very, very interesting to hear. You actually threw quite a few nice nuggets. You talked about sustainability, and you know, this is something that obviously we're going to talk about and touch in a bit, which I think it's really, really interesting. But before we get there, one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, again, this is more to give context to people that that watch this or listen to this podcast, is from, you know, the last 35 years, 40 years of experience that you've had, how has the industry grown, you know, from how it was when you started to how it is now? Has there been a huge change into the supply chain, how things work? Does it need to happen? Do we need to see a change now with the technologies that we have? And obviously this will take it, you know, to the rest of the conversation that we have. But I think that's something that we need to, you know, highlight. And then Dan, I would like your take on this as well.
So something very simple that has changed is the number of players involved who are actually selling to the consumer. It used to be just a very small number of very large companies, multinationals. I mean, you know, the largest brand in the world, Lipton's, was one company. They bought, you know, 30% of the world's teas, and you know, and every large origin had an open outcry auction. You know, and people went and sat in a room and basically were knocked down teas to the highest bidder. Now, the way that works is, if you've been to any auction where selling a single commodity, is that those people that have the volume to buy usually control the momentum in an auction. And the trouble with an auction is that as a producer, you have to produce a tea, and you physically produce it, and you have to put it into a warehouse of that auction practice. before it ever comes up for sale. So you have already committed cash and you've committed labor, sweat, equity, etc., to producing something that you have no idea about the value of or the demand for at that particular point. So now the equation is absolutely swayed towards the bottom of the supply chain, those people that, frankly speaking, don't need it as much as the farmer or the producer. This has been, I'm not going to say manipulated, because I don't believe in that BS, but whenever you put that sort of that timeline into a system, you are going to give the advantage to the buyer rather than the seller. So so the biggest change for me has been the number of buyers, and as social media, e-commerce has allowed total fractionalization of branding and taken away, I mean, anyone can be a tea brand today. They just, they can create a nice fancy piece of packaging. They don't even have to produce the packaging, for God's sake. And suddenly they've got a brand, and then they can go to origin and they can fly the stuff in and put it. It's ridiculous. And the trouble with that is everyone goes, oh, that's great, the emancipation of the industry. The trouble is that the large companies, because of brand equity and brand health, actually looked after responsibilities, i.e. not making claims that were fraudulent, etc. Looking after, to a certain extent, the supply chain, because their brand health demanded it and was so valuable to them. These small people, frankly speaking, don't give a damn, don't know any better, and are only interested in that sale. So we now have a very fractured industry, for which I believe the systems in place today are just not fit for purpose.
Thank you, John. Dan, can you give us your take on this? And then obviously I would like Nico's view as well. And Dan, you have to unmute your mic. Mr. Victor has all of us muted.
I don't have to unmute my mic. Like I told you repeatedly, I am speaking with telepathy. Okay. And the audience that we want for this particular podcast can do the same. Okay.
You're absolutely right.
Just for you normies, I will unmute myself and I will speak the normal English. I'll speak the Kings, right? It's all good. So what is my take on this? Well, I mean, Johnny you really laid it out. And about the Cold War, I was actually on the other side of the Cold War. I grew up in the Cold War, so I know about that. And actually, I mean, we're always afraid. I was on the other side. I was on the Soviet side. And apparently we experienced this. I experienced the same thing in the 80s that you did back in the US back in the 50s or the 60s during the whole Red Scare and the Cuban Missile Crisis and everything with the drills. And we did that in the 80s. The average person was kind of afraid of getting nuked. Like there was always this like inkling thing, because we still had these air raid sirens, because I'm from Kiev originally. We had these air raid sirens from World War II. And once in a while it would go on for whatever reason. And I back in, I think it was 1986 or something, they let the censors, the Soviet censors, they don't really allow many Western movies in, because they were considered capitalist propaganda, and they were going to destroy our feeble minds and pollute it with capitalist thoughts. But one movie that made it through to scare us was The Day After Tomorrow, or the day after. I'm sorry, The Day After. The TV movie with Steve Guttenberg and John Lithgow, and about the nuclear war and everything. And that being like an 8-year-old kid watching that scared the shit out of me. That scared the shit out of me, especially that whole scene with when the bombers actually take off and the actual the war starts with the air raid. So every single time I heard an air raid and there was an actual air raid siren near my house, I thought that the Americans were coming to nuke us. So that was my childhood. Now Now, fast forward to past my trauma. What you're describing in the tea industry is actually something that is really prevalent in a lot of the former Soviet republics, including my my birth republic of, or now country of, Ukraine, and that is fragmentation. That is the fragmentation of the market. There's, of course, a big industry. There's always a big industry. Sometimes it's the government, sometimes it's private, sometimes it's a combination or whatever, right? But there's usually a couple of big guys, and that get stuff from a bunch of small guys. But those big guys are the gatekeepers, right? And so those big guys then have all the access, and then the small guys don't have the access, right? And that's how it was for a long time. And some of it, a lot of it was just due to corruption, but some of it was just because you couldn't really quality control a lot of this stuff coming out of these republics. And it's the same coming out of say Vietnam right now. There's a lot of good commodities coming out of Vietnam, but people don't trust them because people just don't trust Vietnamese goods. And until they get to Singapore, right? And so usually they deal through Singapore because Vietnamese goods through Singapore have to go through some sort of a quality assurance, right? And this is not because I'm really smart about all this stuff. It's actually something that Lamont told us yesterday. Lamont Rutan, he's our advisor in the field of commodities, and so he explained this. And so with technology, and the same as you described it in the tea field, so technology has been kind of a blessing and a curse, right? So on one hand, yeah, you have these producers, or whoever decides to call themselves a producer, have access to some sort of mass medium, right? And then they're out there, and then they start selling their product, and they say, yeah, we are, we're Ukrainian grain producers, right? We're wheat producers from Ukraine, or we're Georgian wine producers. And, we're out there. Oh, we got a really cool website. Oh, and you can get this stuff cheap. And, it's the real deal. It is the real deal. Come on, it's the real stuff. And there's a lot of this stuff now, right? But the problem is that you just never know. You just
I've lost you,
Dan. For some reason, we lost your voice while you were speaking.
He's going back into telepathic mode.
Yeah. Until we get Dan back, Nico, I would like your
you got Dan back.
You're back.
You never lost.
Damn.
Dan lost you.
I tried really hard.
Dan lost you. Look at Nico. Nico looks like he is about to sing us a very lovely Shakira song. Can you sing us a genie in a bottle, Nico? I'm a genie in a bottle. No. Anyway, getting back to what I was saying before I got cut off. I don't know where I got cut off. Long story short, fragmentation, lack of information about where the stuff comes from, even though there is seemingly access to it now. There's still this whole thing about, okay, so how do I really know how, where's this quality assurance that, well, I mean, like at least the big guys, they rip me off, but at least I know what they rip me off on, right? Because they're just, a lot of these bigger guys back in the day, the gatekeepers, they were pretty open about what you can and cannot get. But with these guys, you just don't know. And this is where blockchain comes in. This is what we do comes in. And that's why it's so important. And this is actually, this is something that you were already thinking about, as I understand, John, for a while now. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, really, from the tea industry standpoint, I would say that the biggest problem has been that people talk about, if you speak to the United Nations, FAO, they'll tell you that tea production and consumption is in balance. Okay, they'll tell you that, and yet the tea market continues to go down. Okay, now why is that? That's because there is there is only a macro view, i.e. tons produced, tons sold, rather than tons of what, and the trouble is that what CPG companies have done, and I will blame them, and they can have a go at me, I'm sure they will, is the fact that they have, just like every publicly listed company, they need a quarterly return from something that has a 40-year productive life cycle. So the two are completely out of kilter. So all the time they look to increase their profits from a category that, frankly speaking, has been stagnant to losing ground against other share of throat products, as I put it, be it juices, water, etc. Water, that's, shoot me in the head for buying a bottle of water, but still. And the trouble with this is the fact that the only reaction without, sorry, if I may, I'm going to digress a little bit. Going back to the auction system is like the waist of the archetypal Hollywood actress. It's a tiny little, it's a bottleneck to communication between an infinite number of consumers and an infinite number of producers. Just not enough flow goes up for everyone to understand, hey, what quality are you looking for and what price are you willing to pay? Okay, and this is lacking in the whole thing, and this has been hijacked by CPG companies to make more money. Basically, what they've done is they have reduced the quality of their blends down and down and down to make more money. And in reaction to that, their sustainability answer to this is we'll slap a frog on it, or we'll call it fair trade, and we'll pay that dividend. That doesn't mean that the farmer gets any more money by you. And then what they do is they say, look, we're such good people, we're going to put money into programs of origin through different certifiers or other capacity builders. And usually that intervention is efficiency drives, which is just produce more and you'll get more money. But produce more when the market's already flooded, why would you do that? So basically, anyone in the supply chain can hijack it because no one knows the truth. And so when this Luddite looks at blockchain or learns for the first time about blockchain and what's going on, the one thing that excites me is immutable source of truth. What's in, you can't BS me about it. It's the single source of truth. And that's it. And that completely takes away the ability for the hijacking of the industry and will in turn educate both the consumer and the producer and make this trade viable.
I think John, you hit the nail on the head, because it's a really nice pass for Nico to tell us how he got to meet you. I think that's a great story. And then how he got excited, and how come, and you're here now with us having this conversation. So Nico, please take it away.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think we already touched on how we met. Really, John and I have never actually physically met. We've had a number of calls from the very beginning. I mean, one of the things that struck me about our last conversation, John, was you're quoting the Kenyan proverb about your motivation for being here, and that every time an old man dies, a library burns down, right? And it's that desire to share and to transform, to contribute to the transformation of the world around you that really, inspires me to be around you, and I've really enjoyed our conversations. And so John has been a tremendous help in terms of helping, to guide us, zenGate, in a direction to finding that product market fit, and to really give a sounding board to what we've
lost you, Nico,
for about 2 years. And like John's been around T for 40. So, he's been a great resource in that. And, it's just everything, I mean, more and more, the more and more he speaks, the more and more he echoes, or not, he doesn't echo. Instead, I'm hearing our message through him almost every single time we speak, and because of his knowledge of the need from the industry. And the more that we've gotten into tea, and really when you see agriculture in general, these problems are pervasive. So I mean, in terms of providing that immutable, transparent source of truth, I mean, I've been involved with these think tank talks here in Europe. There's an organization called Diaska, and they're trying to figure out how to help smallholders deal with the deforestation regulations about to hit Europe here in January of 2025. You know, and they're all dancing around the issue that I, as a company, have my data that's proprietary, and I don't want to share it because that gives me an advantage over my competitors. Instead of understanding that that's just not sustainable, that in order to be a sustainable industry, we're all going to have to have access to what we can, to the best of our determination, the truth.
And I think it's quite interesting, actually, this conversation. And I just want to apologize to Victor and Lorena, which is our producer, Victor, and Lorena, our social media manager, because I'm going to go off the questions 100% today because of the conversation and how the information that we're actually bringing up. John, you talked about immutable ledger earlier. And that's something that really got you into, exploring the blockchain space. Nico had a webinar last week with the Tea and Herb Association of Canada, and he was talking about data. And that's something that we actually discussed about quite a few times, is that now when we talk about commodity, it's not just that physical good, right? Physical good is the 50% of the acquisition, if you will, but 50% is the data that comes with it. To your point, what's the proof of origin? Where is it coming from? Is this information that I have in my hands real, right? How can I trust that? So I think it's a very, very interesting topic. I would really like for you to give us a little bit more details on how you found the blockchain technology, and how did it all start in your head of, oh my God, this is something that it can actually be useful into an industry that I've been in the last 4 decades, and I've seen it all.
Theo, let me just add something to that. And I'm sure that, John, you can actually attest to this, because, this happens throughout the entire commodities field. So we have some people actually asking, or once in a while, just kind of give us like, oh, really type of face if they don't really know the commodities field. Well, what do you mean it's 50%? I mean, a commodity is a commodity, right? Well, so, I can still drink tea without the stuff being on the blockchain, right? I can still drink that tea. I mean, I don't need the blockchain to drink the tea. Well, you kind of do, because you don't know if you're actually drinking that tea without the blockchain. And that is where that 50% comes in. And that's also what I kind of wanted to, for you to touch on from your side, because in the commodities field, you get ghost lots, which are, and this is with the legacy commodities field as well. You have a contract on a lot of, say, iron ore, and is going to be traded and is going to go through all these official channels. Then you're going to find out that actually the actual iron ore does not exist. So they've been trading a ghost. And so it happens the same with tea, and I kind of also wanted to get your take on that. What happens with tea? I mean, what are these things where if you don't trace it, what are some of the things that people will get instead of what they think they'll get?
So, I mean, I would say that in tea, we do have, as we say, as the industry is fractured, instead of CPG companies being able to buy direct from origin in 40-foot container loads, 20 tons of tea at a time, bring it in, these small players have got no volume with which to do that. So they have to work through a wholesaler or other raw material provider within the country of consumption. And a lot of these people, frankly speaking, are pretty small fish in the sea too, and they can't do container deliveries. So they're buying from an even larger importer, or they're LCLing it into the country. Their throughput, as I mentioned before, tea used to be just, I remember, at Tetley, frankly speaking, we had a couple of blends that was 90% of the product range. So commodity turns was very high. So everything was fresh all the time. Whereas today, you're not only looking at very small volume throughputs of tea, you're looking at tea exploding into 50, 60 different botanicals. So now you're buying 30, 40 times as many things as we used to buy with a tiny fraction of the volume that we used to sell. This is not good for business. Your turns are going to be crap. So what happens is that the wholesalers, they'll buy, I don't know, a Kongu tea from China, plain black tea, and they'll sell it off as, oh, you want Kiman Hao Ya? Oh yeah, we've got it for you. And they'll just sell it off. So now what you're doing, and I sort of go, well, who cares? That's what a lot of people would say. Hey, my customer likes it, so what's the matter? My problem with it, and I want to put a little disclaimer here, is the fact that just because I'm saying it doesn't mean that the rest of the industry agrees with me. In fact, I suspect that the majority of the industry doesn't agree with me because, one, it's painful and it's uncomfortable, and we're quite okay as we are. Okay, so Dan, to your point, does the trade need it? I tell you that the trade doesn't want it, or at least they can do without it. So we've got to be compelling about this. So here's my first thing on this. So here we are having, from the producer, they produce one thing, it goes a number of different directions, and then it is represented in a number of different ways to a number of different consumers. So now the consumer has no idea what tea is. They're being told a whole bunch of stuff, and sometimes they're being told this is spring crop, first production, Darjeeling, and it's not. So suddenly they go, tea isn't interesting to me because this is plain shit. And the trouble is, people in the tea industry still believe that this is a fight between, say, Kenya as a producer and Assam as a producer, when actually the share of throat is between orange juice, coffee, milk, water, other things that people can slake their thirst with. Okay, so we are doing ourselves a disservice, whomever we represent, from wherever we are. So the beauty about, and there was a coffee auction, and there was a coffee auction set up on blockchain a while ago called Yave. You guys probably know this, and it was for Central Americans. And the beauty about this was it was a two-way conversation. It was an auction that could be entered into by buyers as long as they realized that the floor price, which had been set through third-party determination, was the cost of production plus, and the cost of the central farmers could only enter their lots if they scored 85 points or above. Okay? So now you had a true contract which delivered, hey, this is the quality you're going to get, and this is the minimum price. The farmers understood that you can't enter into this unless you deliver a quality product. And the buyers understood that they could not pay less than it cost to produce. And that's what we're lacking. And so that ability to determine that in a commercial strain, to your point, Dan, then allows people who are actually buying the product through smart codes or whatever, to go down and see the true terroir and locale and timing of that product. And that allows, India has produced, for instance, they have the GI branding for Darjeeling, for instance, has its own branding. But a lot of the tea, that particular origin or region is on life support because, frankly speaking, much cheaper Nepalese tea across the border has been sold as Darjeeling at much lower cost of production. And the Darjeeling guys can't keep up. They just can't make it. If you had this, you could have, you could have latitude and longitude, month of production, how much it costs to make, and this would be the true cost. And no one could refute it. So when a a retailer says, oh yeah, we're doing wonderful things for the Darjeeling trade. Look, we're selling this at $50 a kilo. I go, yeah, sure. That's sustainable for the spring crop that you got. But remember that there's another 5 months of cropping in Darjeeling that no one buys at anywhere close to the cost of production. So if you want to cover the cost of production or give it a living income, you have to take that total output, that weighted average, and then subtract that from your living income to know exactly where you are. So the beauty for me about all this is everything that you said, Dan, including the ability to zero cost account, so that everyone knows what it's actually cost, so that you can't go beyond that. And everyone goes, well, yeah, but market economies, if people produce too much, people won't produce too much after a while if you show them that it doesn't pay to do so.
Yep. Yeah. Nico, we got your back. What are your thoughts?
But it reminds me of, Japan is the number one.
You sound a little bit robotic, Nico.
Yeah, Nico. Are you a robot or are you real?
Like a minion, actually.
Yeah. You do sound like a minion. Well, listen. While Nico figures out his technological antics, Theo.
So we go actually. There's, like I said, we're going off script. Victor, Lorena, excuse me.
They'll be okay.
I think it's a good thing for us to, we talked about sustainability. We talked about, let's make sure we give the power back to the producer. Let's make sure that we, make their livelihoods better, which right now, this is definitely not, the goal for not anybody, but for the most people that are in the industry. With you getting into the blockchain technology and the solutions that the blockchain space brings, and with whatever experience you have, right? Obviously now you've met us, we've had quite a few conversations, so that that obviously gave you some hope. But I would like to ask you, how do you see the next couple of years, or the next 5 years, if you will, in the evolution of the tea industry?
Okay, so firstly, I'd like to say that I think everyone, I definitely give everyone in the tea industry credit for wanting to do something about the sustainability of the industry. I just don't think that many of the solutions are coming up with the right results. The issue, and I know that you harked on it before, I've used the term ethical colonialism. And I use that because it's not because the subjects that people are trying to impose their origin or change their origin are not important. They're just not prioritized. You can't ask someone to worry about deforestation, about other endemic issues, if they can't put food on the table. And I believe the right to that and self-determination are over and above everything else. So I say that straight off. Everyone's doing a bit, in fact, a lot, but some people, I just think it's not having the desired result. So that's the first thing. So if I was going to do a sales pitch for using blockchain or an immutable ledger, let me just call it that, is two things. Firstly, what we've spoken about, one version of truth, so that the industry cannot be hijacked by politics or by whomever. The second thing is the ability, because it's a single stream, if you will, from top to bottom, of putting pass gates into the process, a pass or no-go phase. So at the moment, if you want to sell tea into the European market, there are certain maximum residue limits for agrochemicals, for instance. So people take their lots and they send it to an accredited laboratory, and they get the results back, et cetera, and that's it. But they get it back as a company. At the moment, border security, if you will, CBSA here or whoever it may be, FDA in the States, have the right to, they will sometimes screen containers and they will do the analysis, et cetera, et cetera. This is a pain in the ass, frankly. I mean, tea and a lot of other commodities is actually very low risk, and they've got limited capacity, and they're thinly spread. The beauty about this is that if people like the MRL scientists were oracles into the system, if you will, and created those pass gates, then legislators and FDA, etc., would know that if something had been purchased through this smart contract, that they don't need to look at it because it's had to have passed for it to have made it this far. And that, I think, is an understanding that a lot of people have to get, that, that plus, at the moment we have certifications, which, frankly speaking, stamps that consumers interpret as saying this is sustainable tea. Whereas, in fact, if you speak to a certifier, they'll say this means that a journey towards sustainability has been entered into. Mm-hmm. This is a very different message. And the trouble is, it's open to, it adds risk to the industry because activist media know exactly what that gap is, and they'll go to certified estates to go and find infractions that they can then put in their news stories. And it's happened before many times. Coffee, tea, I could give you a dozen articles in the last 2 years where that's happened. So how do I think this plays out? There are so many people in this entrenched industry whose livelihood depends on the existence of auctions, on the existence of that middle area, that you need a compelling reason to change. And I think that rather like if you're a branded CPG player and you want to put a product on the shelf in a supermarket, you can do it one of two ways. You can either do a push, i.e. you go to the supermarket and say, I want to put my product on your shelf, and they'll say, yeah, the listing fee is $50,000 per SKU, blah, blah, blah. Here you go. This is the marketing support, and you can blow your brains out, right? Or you get a pull into retail, which is you create the compelling story and you prove it in almost, if you will, a guerrilla campaign, so that then they say, we can't do without this product, and they come to you. So I believe that what needs to be done, and tell me to shut up if I'm going on. Well, I am going on, but tell me to shut up when you want me to. But I believe that what needs to happen is we need a proof, we need a case study, a living case study. We need to find the right retailer who cares about paying a living income. And we need to drill that down to a tea that they buy. And then we need to involve everyone in that supply chain. We need to get them to adopt a smart contract so that we can show it living, breathing, and make sure it works. That, I think, will probably take 2 years. But I think that once you do it, here's the thing, everyone goes, retailers are going, oh, I don't want to know that, because if I know it, I can't deny it. Right? But if someone's doing it, their brand health is going to increase above everyone, and they're going to go, shit, cat's out of the bag. What the hell am I going to do? And if anyone believes that that's not going to happen, just in the last 10 days or so, Sainsbury's in the UK made an announcement about bananas, that they've entered a deal to bring a living income, or I think a living wage, they said, which are different. And I want living income, not living wage, but a living wage to the producer of those bananas. And they have already put their head on the line with this. So now we know that the atmosphere is ripe for the picking on living income. We need to get in there and do something about it.
I know Dan will have a lot of things to say, but I want to touch super quick on something that you touched on, and it gives me a lot of hope, actually, that we're on the right direction. Because to your point, we have been doing this case study in Sri Lanka for the past couple of years, and we actually have that that buyer, that person, and that's Fernando from California, from Zen's Tea House, that we are doing actually this, making sure that this case study is has the results that we think that it will have. And that way we can showcase these results to everybody else at the same time. Dan has also been to Sri Lanka quite a few times, and he has met a lot of producers, a lot of regulators, stakeholders. So I would like to get Dan's view and opinion on this as well.
Oh well, as soon as Dan's opinion comes up, look who's here. It's Nico, and still on mute, the co-founder of not letting me voice my opinion.
Go for it. Go for it.
Go for it.
Yeah, yeah. As actually, it's. I mean, I really like what you're saying about living income, right, and about this. I mean, you call it something. I just call it. I mean, it's not colonialism to me. It's terrorism in a way, because really, if you actually been to these tea growing regions, and this is not just tea, this is many regions that produce these commodities that people just are taken for granted, like silk, like grains, like all these different things, right? And you meet the average person that is producing this. I mean, they kind of don't give a shit about ESG. They just want to survive. A lot of these people, for various reasons, many of which are actually kind of crappy, and then the value gets shifted away because of various different bottlenecks and gatekeepers. They make pennies on the dollar on what the stuff actually costs in the end, right? And to them, yeah, it's all about making a living income, and then they're going to care about how sustainable it is. But really, I think that what's important here is that this technology, and as you said, of course, it needs a case study, and we have been doing the case study. This is literally what we've been doing, and this is actually, we've been criticized for it. Say, well, why did you pick tea? Well, because tea checks off all these little check boxes that we, as the blockchain industry, said we're out to fix. Okay, there you go. That's tea. Yeah, you're not gonna become a trillionaire, but there's a lot of things that you can fix there that it can be carried over to other sectors as well, like a living income. And living income really comes from a term that we like to use, or I like to use, I guess, is opportunity inclusion. And that is, it's not about it's not about kind of leveling playing fields, or it's not about entitlements. Oh well, these people should be making more. They should, but are they entitled to it? Well, nobody's really entitled to anything. I mean, this is what, growing up in the Soviet Union and then moving to the U.S. and living on welfare and finding jobs, and my father working for $14 an hour, my job being $2.50, my first job paying me $2.50 an hour, taught me is that really is just all about opportunity. It's all about giving the opportunity for access. And really, that's what this technology is about, I believe. And that's what I think we can provide here, is opportunity for access to a living income for these people, right? And as this living income becomes more and more of a reality, these other things that we in the developed countries care about, like environment and whatnot, all these things will become important because if you want to level up, because it's kind of addictive, right? Especially if you're an immigrant, or especially if you're coming out of poverty, because a lot of these people are in poverty compared to what we are used to, right? You kind of get addicted to it, to say, oh, wait a second, okay, so what I have to do is this and this and this, and I'm not poor anymore. Okay, but if I actually do this and this and this and this, I'm not just not poor, I'm doing okay, and so on and so forth. And that's kind of like the immigrant thinking, but it's also the type of thinking that you will get with people like this, I believe, that will get this opportunity and that will give that will create more opportunities for them, and the living income will basically give them an incentive, right? An incentive to worry about the environment, worry about sustainability, because that's how they can level up. That's what the buyer wants. Now you have access to the buyer. Well, that's what they want, and for that we give them what they want. Okay, and we level up. And so, yeah, I think it's crucial. It's crucial to really to really remove the terrorism and to just give access. Absolutely.
I think you're dead right, Dan. I mean, I remember, and I often quote, when I was at the Naval College, we had an American strategist come over to Royal Naval College in Dartmouth. And this is during the Cold War, when everyone thought we're just going to stay here forever and a day. And he said, there will come a time when the Cold War ends and people are going to think that they can stop spending money on arms. But actually, they'll have to spend more on conventional arms to stop the mass migration of peoples from areas of less development to those of development. And I'm a firm believer, if you ask most people, they would prefer to stay in the country in which they're born. It's familiar to them and they have families there, etc. But they move through desperation. And a lot of world issues, and I hate to go into geopolitics, but a lot of the unrest in the world is caused because a lot of people have nothing to lose. And giving people something to lose and giving something people, as I say, self-determination and the ability to provide for their families will make this a much more peaceful world, as well as one in which commerce is more fairly executed. And I think that above all sort of drives my wheels. I will say that the one challenge, and I put this to you, is that obviously at the moment you're working on specialty tea, and I think that's a good place to start. To get it into mass, we have to work on obviously cost, speed of execution. And blockchain has some issues there, so we've got to think about that, and we have to really we have to refine and define those pass gates to be relevant to the sticklers in the trade, because to your point about terrorism rather than colonialism, what I will say is that, and as a Brit, I'm, of course, point your finger at me, I'm to blame for everything. And but the fact is that actually a lot of colonial structures were very good, and so they were adopted. So unfortunately, it's not that the colonization has happened, it's just now been adopted by locals. And the trouble is, because it sort of works, it's better than whatever they had before, and that's what's keeping it going rather than being fit for purpose. So we need to really refine and define and do a good marketing job. And hey, look, I applaud you for what you've done with Palmyra in Sri Lanka, and I'm looking forward to the next steps.
Thank you, John. We really appreciate your take and all the information that you've shared with us. I really enjoyed this conversation. When we go off script and off topics, this is when we actually all having a good time. And this is definitely one of those conversations. One last thing that I wanted to ask you, just to wrap it all up very nicely, and maybe give some context to the audience as well. If you could highlight in maybe 1 minute, how is the process of tea, from, the producer till all the way to the buyer? What is this process right now because quite a few people most likely won't know what the supply chain or the process is, and how it can be, and maybe Dan can obviously, and Nico touch on that as well, how it can be with the blockchain technology coming into play. I think that would be a good topic for us to wrap it up, the conversation.
Okay, 1 minute. That's
well, what I mean by 1 minute.
So what? So
Nico,
anyway,
Nico, why don't you do this because you're on mute, so we can.
Right. Sorry, I was just getting 1 minute, no problem, right, John?
Yeah. No, that's right. So look,
I'm really trying to just make it,
I know.
in a
your
box.
food, like when you put together that picture for me the one time about how complicated the food system is, I think that's maybe a good image to go from.
Yeah, I mean, I think that look, most people know hopefully that tea comes from a bush, a perennial bush that provides for some of them 100 years, but really 40 years is an efficient growth. And that leaf is plucked primarily by smallholders. And those smallholders would deliver that leaf to a factory where through a series of processes, it becomes black, green, oolong, white, or other teas. Okay, and that tea is then sorted. And that's the other thing that people don't understand is that it's sorted. And in that sortation process, that could be either specialty leaf tea or a tea bag tea. So you cannot disconnect the one from the other, really. That tea packaged then gets sold one of two ways, either through private contract, that only happens between big producers and big buyers, or it goes into auction. And that's the shit show that I spoke about before. And sorry, auctioneers, but that's what it is. And from that, obviously, it gets shipped off to various origins. And the CPG companies will always be looking for a consistent product. So they will buy product, many lots from the same origin and different origins, and blend them together, sometimes out of FIFO, out of rotation, if you will, to ensure consistency 12 months of the year. So what the consumer gets is actually a mishmash of a whole bunch of things. That the leaf was blended in the first place, then in production it was blended, then it's blended by the CPG company. So what the consumer gets, they really don't know. So that whole thing is very complex. There's a lot of different cases involved. If you look at, as I mentioned, that sort of hourglass type of communication, that's also, I mean, so the difference is when you look at the margin attribution, it's actually an inverse pyramid. Smallest amount at the bottom, and then it goes up. We all know what retail margins are, CPGs margins are. The one thing that a lot of people don't know, I think, is if you look at cost of goods for a packaged tea product on the shelf, depending obviously on form, but if you look at a tea bag product, which is frankly speaking the ubiquitous way that tea is sold, tea is no more than 30% of that cost of goods, right? So when people say, oh, we can't afford more for tea, I say, hey, if you could double it, no one would give a shit, frankly. I mean, really, just wouldn't make much difference, but what would it do to the rest of the supply chain? So the whole ability to be able to show the truth. And I mean, I'll go back, Theodore, because you actually, the first question I had here, which I was actually quite weird about, just to help your producers say that you are staying on script, was, what are the 7 grandfather teachings? I went, why have they put that on there? Well, I just give you a little thing on this. We help an indigenous brand here called Cabernish, and they use the 7 grandfather teachings, which are the Anishinaabe people used as the guiding principles. And they are truth, wisdom, humility, love, bravery, respect, and honesty. And all I'd say is that those looked after millennia of existence for indigenous peoples, not only here in North America, but in other places. And we've lost this. And we need to get back to these guiding principles. And I believe that smart contracts can embed some of those so that we humans who have been led astray don't have to think too hard about embedding them back into contract form again.
Thank you so much, John. Dan or Nico, do you guys want to touch on this point as well, and then we can wrap it up?
Nico, why don't you go ahead? I think I've done enough talking in circles today.
I'll give it one last shot. It's not been my day with technology. I hope it's working well now. But yeah, there's not much more that I could add to what John has said. But I mean, just this idea that, you know, we shouldn't feel so good about providing a livable wage. That should be the basic, right? And we should incentivize the opportunity to do better than a livable wage, right? And so maybe I'm doing okay. I'm supporting my family, and I know that I have enough money set aside to send my children to school to do something more than I did. Okay, maybe that's where I'm at in my family's path through existence. Okay, that's a lot better than poverty. That's a lot better than a starvation wage. And it should be what incentivizes at least one level of the economy. But it'd be even better for me to know, you know what? I have a stake in this. I can work hard, and my hard work can get rewarded somehow. And I don't see anything else out there that's really providing that opportunity. And so, yeah, that's just where I think in the end, when we talk about sustainability for industry, sustainability as a species, just like John was saying, we need to have a system that incentivizes correct action, not just from workers in the field, but from those of us who would profit from their hard work, right? So a smart contract can ensure we can append data that's connected to how much the laborers are getting paid, and that's going to have an effect on what the consumer's opinion of my product. If they know that the caloric intake of the people working in the field is 60% of what it should be, maybe they don't want to buy my product anymore, right? And if it's just part of my score as a company, and maybe it's not that specific data point, but there's like a overall ethical score that gets associated with me that's derived from all these different data points. Well, that kind of incentivization of doing the right thing, unfortunately, that's where we've evolved to as a species. And I don't see any other technology that could provide that. So let's go and make people be good.
Yeah, not force them to be good, actually.
Incentivize them.
Yeah, incentivize. Yeah, I mean, it's all about incentives. And I just again, coming from a country that was good at forcing people to do stuff. In fact, in the Soviet Union, we have many different flavors of forcing. Forced labor, forced indoctrination, forced feeding. We were really good at that kind of stuff back there. It just doesn't work. Negative reinforcement is not a long-term solution.
I think that yeah, right. I think if you don't know the truth, then propaganda can control you, and anyone in the trade at the moment can tell their own story, and there's very few people that can call BS on them. And so you can't expect people to be good if they don't know the truth. And so as you rightly say, we're not forcing anyone. We're just making it able for them to be good.
Yeah. Well, I think that is a good place to kind of leave it off for today. What do you think, Theo?
Yeah, I think we actually had a great conversation with John. We shared quite a few information today. I definitely learned a lot, especially with all the information that John shared from his experience, and especially how things work and what we can do to actually make those small, if not big, tweaks and actually make everybody's lives better, make the product better, make the trade better. I think everyone can actually benefit from bringing these solutions to the table, all the way from the producer to the person that is plucking the tea or any other commodity, really. Yes, we have focused more on tea because John is from this industry and we as zenGate have talked about tea a lot. But these things, as John said earlier, do apply to different soft commodities, to other commodities in general. And yes, the supply chain might be a bit different, but the problems are the same. And I think this is the most important thing that we should all understand, that the problem is there. Everyone has the same problem, regardless what the industry is really. And the solution is there as well. We do have the technology now. 5 years ago, we didn't have anything. We were talking about wishful thinking. We had a vision. Now it's actually time that we do things. And yes, now we have the technology. We have the case study. It's a matter of putting the messaging out, bringing people like John that are actually super passionate about their job, about what they do, and would like to see that change for the better for everyone. So with that, I just want to thank John and Nico for being with us today for the 6th episode of The Mainstream, a podcast that myself and Daniel Friedman, the CEO of zenGate, have been doing for a while now, and will keep doing, because this is where we can have these conversations that people can learn more about the problems that are out there, and also the solutions that we can have without even knowing that we have this new technology, underneath the applications that we're using. So I just wanted to close with this, and thank you all for joining us. We will have our next appointment next Tuesday, same time, same place. There might be a small possibility that I won't be here, but Nico is definitely going to be co-hosting this with Dan.
And Nico is definitely going to figure out his technical difficulties by then.
I think I have. I think finally, we're it took us one show.
Yeah,
It's okay. It's all good. It
what better place to troubleshoot? What better place?
Mr. John, I just wanted to give you, the microphone for one last time for today, for this conversation, for any final thoughts, and then I would like to hear from Nico and Dan as well before we wrap this up.
Well, I just thank you all for the opportunity, because it's I speak to people in the trade. But I really speak from a position of no authority. And you guys do, with respect to this, and to be able to dialogue with the technology side of things and bring those two sides together is a smart thing for you guys to do, and it's very educational for me, and I can go forward and rant with much more authority, having been on this. So thank you for giving me the platform, and I honestly believe that whether I sound contradictory to the majority of the trade, I have the best intentions at heart. I believe that the certifiers who are there at the moment, and the NGOs, their capacity building will be required to build the information that goes into a smart contract, but their stamp will not. And with that, thank you.
Thank you, John. Dan, any final thoughts?
Yeah, thank you very much for coming on the show. I mean, it was a great pleasure, and I mean, look, you're a T buyer, right? You're a T buyer, right? So this is something that that a lot. Well, that I can't say a lot, but we do get this question, right? So what does the buyer think? Because we featured producers, we have showed what we do in Sri Lanka, we showed what we do with the technology, right? We showcased that. We've done numerous pieces on that. However, many will ask, okay, but what about the buyer? Okay, and it's really it's fantastic to be able to get the point of view of you, the buyer, the one on the other side utilizing these kinds of platforms, or our platform, which again, we're not, I try to refrain from shilling on this, because this is not about Paul Meyer per se. It's about it's about the mainstream industry's adoption of blockchain tech. However, it is also good to see that somebody like you, how you see it being adopted, because you're not some you're not some youngster out there, a Generation Zer trying to make things better for the world. You've been around, and you've been in the trade for a long time, and you've seen it evolve, and you've seen it change, and you've seen technologies come and go, I'm sure, and it's just really good to see you and to get your feedback on this particular, but the possibilities here. So thank you very much for coming on and having this conversation with us.
Yeah, well, Dan, I just finished with this. You brought that up about buyers. The one difference today versus 20 years ago even is the fact that there used to be tea specialists who were buyers, and now they're generic buyers. And that's another issue, is the fact that they don't have the skill set to be able to build a purposeful industry, frankly. And they're really looking at being effective. Effective buyers just means buying it cheaper. So to embed information into a truthful contract will aid them and help them. And anything that makes their life simpler and means that they don't have to go to a dozen people to get a version of truth, they should be very happy with.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, John and Dan. Nico, I would like to give the opportunity for you, if your phone,
if technology allows it.
Just real quick, all I want to say is again that having access to people like John has really shaped the way that zenGate has approached the problem. Okay, not just for tea specifically, but for agricultural products in general. Tea does have some particular challenges, right? That other products might not, but there are still so many things that are in common. And so, Phil, Chef, you mentioned that we were talking to the Tea and Herbal Association of Canada last week. This week we're just talking to ESTA, the European Specialty Tea Association. We just joined them, right? And so just being in the company of these scholars has put us in a position to action on their knowledge in a way that they haven't been able to do because maybe the timing was wrong or something else. But still, it's been a fantastic journey. I have to jump off right now because I've got another meeting for zenGate Business. But it's been a real privilege, and thank you.
We are all going to be jumping off in the next few seconds. I just want to close this by thanking everyone that watched this podcast now or will watch it in a recorded. And we will see you all in a week from now. Take care. Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.